When systems die, everything you think you know about danger becomes outdated in seconds. But here's the truth almost no one realizes until it's too late. The collapse doesn't kill you. Your miscalculations do, and the few who survive, they all run the same 5 calculations like a reflex. Miss even one, and you become part of the debris. Survival after systemic failure isn't about strength, luck, or optimism. It's arithmetic. Cold, unforgiving arithmetic. How long your resources last. How far you can move. How fast a threat can reach you. How much energy you can spend before your body turns against you. Every choice becomes a number. Every mistake becomes a cost you can't repay. People fail because they think the collapse is chaos. It isn't. It follows brutal logic. Water runs out at a predictable rate. Fear drains more calories than work. Panic pushes you into bad ground. Trust spreads risk like a disease. Resting too long steals daylight you can't buy back. Everything has a measurable consequence. In this video, you'll learn the top 5 survival calculations you must make when systems die. The same calculations used by people who actually lived through breakdowns, blackouts, isolation events, and failed rescues. You'll see how survivors convert uncertainty into data, how they map threat vectors, how they judge if helping someone is a lifeline or a death sentence, and how they calculate the exact moment when staying is fatal and moving is the only option. Watch until the end. Not because it's dramatic, but because these 5 calculations decide one thing: whether your timeline extends or ends. And in a world without systems, that's the only math that matters. When systems collapse, the world doesn't kill you with violence first. It kills you with subtraction. Supplies disappear quietly, steadily, predictably, unless you measure them with brutal accuracy. That's why the first survival calculation is always the same. How long until your resources hit zero, and how often can you realistically replace them? Every survivor who ignores this dies early. Every survivor who masters it buys time. Everything you carry has a burn curve. Water drains fastest. Food follows. Fuel evaporates through use, leakage, or evaporation. Batteries die even when idle. Medicine expires. Bandages run out faster than anyone expects. And warmth, something people forget to treat as a consumable, demands fuel, calories, insulation, or movement to maintain. It all costs something. It all disappears. Most people underestimate their daily consumption because they measure it under normal life assumptions. Collapse strips those assumptions away. Stress spikes metabolism. Cold steals calories as fast as work. Moving under load multiplies burn rate. Fear disrupts sleep, and sleep disruption increases energy use the next day. Hunger compounds, dehydration compounds, exhaustion compounds. By the time a person realizes they're in deficit, the deficit is already lethal. The math is harsh but simple. Total supply, actual daily consumption, your survival window. But that number means nothing without the second variable, resupply probability. After the collapse, resupply is no longer routine. It becomes a risk event. Every trip burns calories, exposes you to threats, and opens you to variables you don't control. You don't calculate when you want to go. You calculate when you must go, with precision. Survivors set hard thresholds. If water falls below a certain percentage, movement is mandatory, not debated. If calories fall below a set number of days, the strategy shifts from conservation to acquisition. These thresholds override emotion. They remove hesitation. They prevent the classic fatal mistake, waiting one day too long. Tracking consumption becomes ritual. Survivors log every sip, every calorie, every match burned, every battery drained. Not because they enjoy structure, but because collapse has no mercy for people who estimate. Numbers replace hope. Data replaces comfort. Clarity replaces denial. Group survival complicates the math. A single injured member can double water burn and triple calorie demand. A child's needs distort the consumption curve. A large group gains efficiency in tasks, but loses efficiency in resources. The survivor mind adjusts instantly, recalculating the moment conditions change. Resupply itself must be analyzed like an investment. A resupply run that offers only a small gain but carries high risk is a net loss. A run that yields predictable resources becomes a lifeline. Survivors don't rely on luck. They rely on pattern, timing, and minimal exposure. This calculation sits at the top of the hierarchy because every other survival decision depends on it. If you misjudge your consumables, no amount of strategy, strength, or courage compensates. The collapse always collects what you fail to measure. When systems fail, danger isn't random. It follows paths. It follows structure. It follows the routes you overlooked because you assumed safety worked like it used to. Survivors know better. They run the second calculation automatically. Which approach vectors lead to you, and how quickly can a threat travel through each one? This isn't fear. It's geometry tied to survival. Every location, urban, rural, underground, improvised, has a shape. That shape defines how threats move. A room with 2 doors is safer than a room with 4. A house on a hill sees farther than a house between buildings. A campsite near a bend in the trail hears less than a campsite above an open slope. Collapse turns the world into a map of angles, sightlines, sound paths, and blind spots. If you don't calculate these, someone else calculates them for you. A defensive vector is any route a threat can use to reach your position. Straight lines give speed. Curved lines give stealth. Dense vegetation hides movement. Abandoned streets echo footfalls. Wind direction carries smoke, odor, and conversation farther than visuals. Even moonlight and cloud cover change vector strength. Survivors learn to read these conditions the way others read weather apps. The calculation revolves around exposure. A shelter with many open vectors has a high breach probability. A position with low visibility has slow detection time. A location surrounded by structures increases sound traps that reveal your presence but hide others. People who don't assess exposure assume they're hidden. Survivors measure it like a threat clock. Vector load also depends on population density. A collapsed suburb carries faster movement from desperate groups. A remote cabin might have fewer threats, but receives them with no warning. Urban ruins create unpredictable approach routes, holes in walls, broken windows, collapsed floors that connect spaces never meant to be connected. The world becomes porous. Survivors convert observation into action. They block vectors that are too easy. They fortify angles that offer speed to attackers. They move sleeping positions away from predictable entry lines. They cook where vented smoke can't broadcast their location. They position supplies on interior corners, not near walls that can be breached. Every adjustment cuts breach probability. Shifting light cycles matter. Daytime gives distance visibility. Night gives stealth to anyone approaching. This is why survivors rotate micro-watch periods, not long shifts, short, sharp intervals designed to catch movement during the hours when vectors are most active. The collapse doesn't reward endurance, it rewards consistency. Relocation becomes part of the calculation. A structure that's defensible today might become unsafe tomorrow because new vectors appear. A fallen fence, a broken door, a group passing through and mapping your area. Survivors don't wait for a breach to confirm the math. If a location crosses a certain risk threshold, they leave. Not because they want to, because the geometry demands it. Danger doesn't choose its victims at random. It simply moves along the paths they failed to analyze. Survivors stay alive because they measure those paths before anyone steps onto them. After a collapse, effort becomes one of the last currencies you still control. But unlike supplies, you can't stockpile it. You wake up with a limited amount and the world drains it whether you want to spend it or not. That's why survivors rely on the third calculation. Does this task give back more than it takes? Collapse victims ignore this. Survivors live by it. Every movement costs calories. Every decision costs mental energy. Every period of stress burns fuel even while you're sitting still. Walking with a pack doubles energy drain. Moving uphill triples it. Cold weather steals calories every minute. Hunger slows recovery. Fatigue compounds. It's a system designed to punish inefficiency. The trap most people fall into is simple. They stay busy. They forage in depleted areas. They chase animals they can't catch. They carry water from sources too far away. They spend hours building things they don't need. They confuse activity with progress. The collapse doesn't care. It only measures the equation: energy spent versus energy returned. A survivor evaluates every task through hard logic. Hunting sounds useful, but if the terrain is against you, if the noise risk is high, if the likelihood of returning empty-handed is significant, the task is negative return. Foraging can be efficient, but not when everyone has already stripped the area. Even boiling water has an energy cost: fuel burned, time invested, exposure created. Energy return is not just about calories. Some tasks give strategic value. Repairing shelter may not feed you today, but it reduces future heat loss, future fuel expenditure, and future exposure. Setting traps requires an initial energy spike, but then pays back continuously with minimal effort. Digging a small drainage trench during dry weather prevents catastrophic energy loss during storms. These tasks may not look productive, but they pay long-term dividends. Risk must also be factored into return. A task that puts you in a situation where injury is possible becomes extremely expensive. A sprained ankle can triple consumption for the next week. A minor cut can become infected and demand medical resources you can't replace. A single misstep on unstable terrain can turn a positive task into a cascading negative that drains the entire group. Survivors treat risk as part of the energy equation, not separate from it. The collapse rewards those who simplify. Survivors gravitate toward tasks with high, predictable return. Collecting firewood near shelter. Foraging high-density zones at low exposure times. Maintaining gear to prevent catastrophic failure. Establishing routines that multiply small gains. They avoid hero tasks, anything that feels dramatic, impressive, or cinematic. Collapse is not a movie, it's accounting. Every evening, survivors reassess. What did the day give? What did it cost? Did today extend the timeline or shrink it? This ritual prevents drift. It prevents wasted effort. It prevents the slow slide into exhaustion that kills more people in collapse scenarios than direct threats ever do. In a world where every calorie keeps your future alive, the math is merciless. If the task doesn't pay you back, it's already killing you. After the collapse, people become both asset and threat. And the dangerous truth is this: most survivors aren't killed by hunger, cold, or exposure. They're killed by other people, or by what other people carry. That's why the next calculation matters more than comfort, kindness, or instinct. What is the real cost of letting someone into your circle? Trust becomes a form of debt. Every person you interact with adds weight to your survival equation. They consume resources. They reveal your position. They increase noise. They introduce conflict. They bring habits you can't control. And worst of all, they bring pathogens, bacteria, viruses, parasites that hit harder when medical systems are gone. Collapse turns social interaction into risk multiplication. Most victims miscalculate because they're lonely. They think company means safety. They think groups guarantee protection. But groups only work when every member pays back more than they take. If even one person becomes a drain, physically, emotionally, logistically, the entire group's survival window shrinks. One weak link increases consumption, slows movement, exposes the group to detection, or becomes a liability in conflict scenarios. Survivors run silent assessments. They watch how a person handles stress, how they conserve water, how they react to scarcity, how they share workload, how they manage fear. These behaviors show whether someone adds value or silently eats your future. Contagion risk is the part most people ignore. A single untreated infection can wipe out an entire shelter. Minor fevers spread faster in cold environments. Respiratory illnesses travel rapidly in enclosed spaces. A small cut on someone else's hand becomes your problem if they touch your tools or food. Collapse isn't forgiving. Disease spreads without clinics, antibiotics, or sanitation. Survivors adjust behavior accordingly. They quarantine newcomers, not out of cruelty but logic. They establish physical separation during sleep. They isolate cooking areas. They track coughs, wounds, and hygiene patterns. They monitor waste disposal because untreated waste becomes airborne or waterborne risk. Every interaction is measured as potential gain or potential outbreak. Social trust debt also includes betrayal probability. Desperate people act in predictable ways. They hide information, exaggerate injuries, hoard food, or wait until your guard drops. A person who doesn't share their past can't be trusted. A person who refuses small responsibilities won't handle big ones. A person who panics during low stress will break under real pressure. Survivors read these signs the way others read weather changes, quietly, constantly. The hardest part is enforcement. Cutting someone from the group feels cruel, but collapse isn't about feelings. It's about survival math. When a person's cost outweighs their value, the group must separate. Not later. Not after one more chance. Numbers don't negotiate. In a world where infections spread, motives shift, and desperation grows by the hour, trust is no longer a virtue. It's a calculation you must get right, because choosing the wrong person is the fastest way to join the list of people who didn't. In a collapsed world, time becomes the most unstable variable. It speeds up when danger rises. It slows down when you hesitate. It punishes every delay with consequences that compound long after the moment feels small. That's why survivors rely on the fifth calculation. When does the window for action open? And when does it close forever? Most people die because they move too late. They wait for certainty. They wait for calm. They wait for one more hour. Collapse doesn't give them that hour. Threats advance. Resources shrink. Weather shifts. Illness accelerates. Everything changes faster than human instinct can process. Survivors compensate by replacing instinct with timing logic. Every situation has an invisible clock. A storm forming on the horizon means shelter must be secured before temperature drops. A rising noise pattern in the distance means relocation must begin before traffic funnels toward your position. A water supply trending downward means movement must happen before dehydration affects judgment. The moment you can detect the problem, you're already late. The calculation forces you to act before the situation crosses into unrecoverable territory. Survivors map their timelines into phases: the current state, the projected state, and the irreversible state. The current state tells you where you stand. The projected state tells you when conditions will turn hostile. The irreversible state marks the point beyond which no decision matters because it's too late to change the outcome. People who don't calculate these states get trapped. Survivors avoid the trap entirely. Signals matter. A temperature drop means mobility will worsen. An abnormal silence in an urban zone means either threat movement or resource exhaustion. A pattern of footsteps at night means your shelter is now on someone's map. A steady decline in energy levels means you're heading toward collapse long before you feel the crash. Survivors interpret signals as countdowns. Acting early feels uncomfortable, even reckless, but it preserves the timeline. Acting late feels safe, familiar, emotional, but it's fatal. Collapse punishes emotional timing. Survivors follow mathematical timing. The decision matrix becomes a constant evaluation. If staying increases risk faster than moving, you move. If delaying creates more uncertainty than action, you act. If waiting shifts the advantage to the environment or to other people, the decision is already made. You just need to accept it. A crucial part of this calculation involves preloaded choices. Survivors don't waste time building options in the moment. They prepare exit routes. They pre-pack relocation gear. They memorize fallback shelters. They store water at multiple points. They set thresholds. If X happens, do Y immediately. No debate, no hope-based thinking. Preloaded choices turn panic moments into simple execution. The collapse rewards those who understand that time is not neutral. It works against you unless you impose structure on it. When you treat every major decision as a timed event, the world becomes predictable again. Not safe, but manageable. The ones who survive aren't the fastest or strongest. They're the ones who act before the window closes. Survival after a full system collapse isn't about mastering a single skill. It's about merging every calculation you've learned into one operating system, one mindset, one daily protocol that keeps you alive when structure, law, supply chains, and predictability vanish. This final part pulls the previous calculations together into a working playbook, something you can run every day without hesitation, without emotion, and without wasted motion. The first synthesis is understanding that each calculation feeds the others. Consumable rate influences mobility. Mobility changes defensive vectors. Defensive vectors dictate energy expenditure. Energy levels affect the decisions you can make within the time window. Social interactions impact all of it, silently, constantly. Survivors don't treat these as separate ideas. They treat them as one continuous equation that recalculates itself as the world shifts around them. The day begins with reality checks. Before movement, before tasks, before planning, survivors run a rapid audit. Remaining water, remaining calories, current fatigue level, temperature trend, weather signals, noise pattern, group stability. This isn't a ritual. It's the starting line. Without this audit, the day is built on assumptions, and assumptions kill faster than hunger. Once the audit is done, the operational cycle starts. The first priority is always consumables. If the numbers show a deficit, the day becomes a resupply day. Immediately. No postponing, no bargaining with yourself. The math leads, and you follow. If supplies are stable, the next step becomes vector assessment. Survivors analyze whether their shelter or camp remains defensible today, not yesterday. Wind direction, new footprints, disturbed brush, unusual silence, broken debris. All of these can mean your safe zone is already compromised. If the vectors show rising risk, the timeline shifts. Movement becomes more valuable than staying still, even if it costs calories. A defensible position with 20% more energy expenditure is still better than a compromised position with perfect comfort. Survivors choose advantage, not convenience. Energy management then shapes the day's tasks. You don't push for big accomplishments when your energy return will be negative. You don't hunt large game if the ground is against you. You don't make long treks if dehydration is creeping up. Survivors choose tasks that extend long-term survival. Small foraging runs, gear maintenance, tool repair, trap setting, insulation improvement, water collection, perimeter cleanup, quiet work, low exposure work, high return work. Social calculation weaves through the entire day. Survivors observe group members the same way they observe weather patterns, silently, continuously, objectively. Someone moving slower, someone drinking more, someone acting erratic, someone avoiding tasks, someone coughing. None of these are small details. They are survival signals. If left unchecked, they become breaches, resource drains, or medical emergencies that erase your timeline overnight. Trust is earned in small actions, not declared in words. As daylight fades, the time-critical decision matrix activates again. Survivors don't wait until dark to decide where they sleep. They don't wait for rain to choose shelter. They don't wait for exhaustion to choose rest periods. They pre-position options before the environment forces their hand. The collapse respects only those who stay ahead of its curve. Every evening ends with recalculation. It's not reflection. It's not storytelling. It's pure arithmetic. Did today gain time or lose it? Did risk increase or decrease? Did the group become stronger or weaker? Did consumption exceed expectations? Did the world outside your perimeter grow louder, quieter, or more unpredictable? Survivors use this recalculation to shape tomorrow's protocols. This daily cycle, audit, vector check, energy logic, social assessment, time window execution, recalculation, creates momentum. Momentum is life. Stagnation is death. The collapse punishes static behavior, clinging to places, clinging to routines, clinging to yesterday's safety. Survivors remain fluid, responsive, adaptive. They treat survival like a moving equation, not a fixed plan. The synthesis ends with mindset, not optimism, not fear, not hope. Discipline. Survival is the discipline to follow the math even when your emotions disagree. The discipline to abandon a camp you spent days building because the geometry changed. The discipline to conserve energy when anxiety tells you to waste it. The discipline to move early instead of late. The discipline to cut ties when a person becomes a liability. The discipline to trust numbers over instinct, data over comfort, reality over desire. When systems die, the world stops rewarding good intentions. It rewards clarity, adaptive logic, and cold decision-making. Follow the playbook, run the calculations, enforce the mindset, extend the timeline. In the collapse, you don't win, you continue. And continuing is everything.